Welcome to the CHCI Fall Tech Summit panel, Safeguarding America's Cybersecurity. Our panel host is Congresswoman Lucille Roybal-Allard, representing California's 40th Congressional District. Congresswoman Roybal-Allard is the first Latina to serve as one of the 12 cardinals, or chairs, of a House Appropriations Subcommittee, as well as the first Latina to serve on the House Appropriations Committee. She is also the first woman to chair the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the first woman to chair the California Democratic Congressional Delegation, and the founder of the Women's Working Group on Immigration Reform. Our moderator for today's session is Brian Hubbard. He is a strategic business leader with 3 decades of experience architecting, designing, and developing solutions to address some of the nation's top cybersecurity challenges. Brian was a primary author and led the contractor team supporting NIST in the development of their cybersecurity framework. Please welcome our opening remarks speaker, Congresswoman Lucille Roybal-Allard, followed by our moderator, Brian Hubbard.
Thank you for inviting me to address a core Homeland Security challenge we are facing today, cybersecurity. Repeatedly, the technologies that we rely on, from computers and cell phones to pipelines and electric grids, have increasingly become targets of hackers. At the same time, our skilled cybersecurity workforce has remained stagnant, and our policies have failed to mature fast enough to keep pace with these evolving threats. It is unnerving how easily hackers have been able to manipulate the control systems of our critical infrastructure, infiltrate federal civilian agency networks, and exfiltrate sensitive data. Just in the past year, the rise in ransomware attacks have impacted police departments, hospitals, water treatment plants, and most notably, the Colonial Pipeline. The attacks demonstrate that cybersecurity breaches are no longer isolated incidents. They are also a warning of the urgency of us needing to do more to secure our nation's cyber infrastructure. As chair of the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee, I've made cybersecurity a priority. This is reflected in the dramatic increase in CISA's funding in our FY22 appropriations bill to help prevent the cyber attacks, root out cyber intrusions, and when necessary, assist in the response and recovery efforts following a significant cyber incident. Network systems, endpoints, and operational technology are an emerging battlefield for both the public and private sectors. In fact, the majority of our critical infrastructure is actually owned and operated by the private sector. So the federal government simply cannot meet the challenges alone. That is why the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute has brought in technology industry leaders to join us in tackling these challenges and raising the bar for cybersecurity. I look forward to hearing more from our panelists on that topic today and on their overall vision for modernizing our nation's approach to cybersecurity.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Hubbard. I'm the Director of Commercial and Cybersecurity here at Edwards Performance Solutions. We're based out in Columbia, Maryland, and I'm pleased to be here today to lead a discussion for this breakout session titled Safeguarding America's Cybersecurity during this day-long virtual summit. First, I would like to thank Marco Davis, the Congresswoman, and Congressman J. Luis Carrera for setting the tone for this discussion. And thank you to CHCI for giving us this opportunity and providing the platform to discuss the importance of safeguarding cybersecurity in the United States. So in this session, we will discuss the issues of data protection and privacy and explore the cybersecurity landscape to help us all better understand how we as individuals and as businesses have key roles in protecting the nation's cybersecurity, as well as our own cybersecurity. The threats to our information and as witnessed in the recent cyber attacks, the threats to our nation's critical infrastructure are very real. Okay, the private sector and public sectors must work together to improve and safeguard our nation's cybersecurity. That's a lot, right? So there's a lot to unpack, and we only have an hour, so let's dig in. So as always, it is critical that we hear from you as the audience. So we really want you to participate. So during this discussion, please place your comments and questions in the chat feature on the right side of your screen. And you can also go out into social media and use the hashtag CHCI Summit to make comments and provide feedback on the and hopefully create some excitement out in the community about what's going on here today. So we have an exciting group of leaders on today's panel, and I'm super excited about this panel. And if you could please have, as we bring them in, welcome them in, I would say we'll give them a round of applause, but we're virtual today. But so our first panelist is Soledad Toledano. And Soledad, would you please talk a little bit about yourself and give us a brief background?
Sure. Thank you so much, Brian. So, hola a todos. Thanks to the CHCI for inviting me today to this panel that is so important nowadays. I'm Soledad Toledano, cybersecurity engineer. I have had several roles during the last decade in cybersecurity, so I just now introduce myself as a security person. So I've been most of my career in cybersecurity operations, doing penetration testing, vulnerability management, incident response, and cybersecurity analysis. I also have an expertise in network security architecture and high performance computing security. During the last years, I've worked at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center, and I also was the network security chair for the AMC IEEE Supercomputing Conference. I recently joined Google a couple of months ago as a technical program manager for security.
Great, thanks, and welcome. So our next panelist is Amanda Lee Kimmerer. So Amanda, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Brian. Thank you. And thank you to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute for inviting both of us to be on this discussion about cyber. So my name is Amanda Lee Kimmerer. I'm based here in San Antonio, Texas, born and raised here in San Antonio as well. I run my own company called Javilude, and we're focused on redefining innovation at the intersection of tech, people, politics, and art. So we're really excited to be here. My background in cybersecurity actually started with digital marketing and analytics. And so I came to cyber through privacy. So I'm really passionate about both cyber and privacy and how to bring those two fields together and build trust between those two areas. Previously, before running my own business, I worked at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, where we convened, connected, and branded the San Antonio cyber ecosystem. A lot of folks don't know this, but San Antonio's cyber ecosystem is the second largest in the country, second only to the DC area. So we have a huge nexus of federal partners and other folks here in San Antonio. So it's fun to be back in my hometown and helping to secure cyber in this space. I wanted to share too in my intro, I started my career with LULAC. So it's really exciting to be here at CHCI and be part of this panel after having started with LULAC and grew up looking at CHCI and really admiring a lot of folks in this space. So really excited to talk about cyber and share some information about how folks can protect themselves. Thanks, Brian.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so let's get started. So what I'd like to do is kind of, just try to, talk a little bit about and frame the conversation a little bit here today. As we all know, right, we're in a completely connected and data-driven world these days, right? And cybersecurity is often looked at alongside of privacy. It's kind of, sometimes they're even, considered interchangeable. But I'd like to unpack that a little bit because there may be some nuances there that I think would help the audience. So Amanda, what is cybersecurity and privacy in your mind, and what is it about that security and privacy that's really how's that shaping up for people, and especially as it relates to the Latino and vulnerable communities and their data. What are your thoughts on what those definitions should be, and how people should think about them?
That's a great question. That's a big question to start with, too, about definitions, because I'm sure if you ask somebody what cyber means or privacy means, you'll get different answers for each person. So I'm excited to hear what Soledad's going to say, too. In terms of cyber, I think of it as protecting networks, systems, and increasingly people, lives, from external and internal threats. And that can be done in different ways on an individual basis, enterprise basis, national and international basis as well. So that's how I see cyber as a protection of those things and people. In terms of privacy, I look at privacy nowadays more through an individual lens of, what does it mean to have privacy? What does it mean to have a right to privacy? From a policy lens, how do you legislate that? How do you regulate that? How do you hold folks accountable for privacy? It's hard, I think, to answer your question too. It's harder to define, to me, privacy than cyber in terms of definitions. So that's what I think where we're at with that. And then in terms of how it impacts our community, we're a target. Right? We saw it in the last election. We saw the disinformation and misinformation campaigns. We saw a lack of funding and coverage before the election and resources to thwart and prevent and kind of detect that threat too. So I think looking ahead to the upcoming election season, I'm looking towards that and seeing how cyber privacy are defined, and then also how our communities are informed and educated in this space. So I'll stop there for now.
Awesome. So solid. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I can add a little bit to the definitions about cybersecurity and privacy. So for me, cybersecurity is the technology and best practices we use to protect technology per se. That means cybersecurity protects software and hardware, meaning it protects services, it protects infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
used to provide services. It could be networks or the whole infrastructure organizations are using, and also protects data. Inside that data, there's a part of that data that is it has privacy concerns because it identifies people, and that's when that's where cybersecurity protects privacy.
Mm-hmm.
That chunk of data, or that set of data that we call PII, personal identifier information, and it's something that some data that can identify a person. It could be names, it could be addresses, it could be a lot of things like pinpoints a particular individual. So I would say those are the differences between cybersecurity and privacy.
Yeah, and just another category of data that sort of straddles those two lines too is protected health information, right? So individuals' health records and that sort of thing are also those pieces of private data, right? That affect your life, right? Affect things that you're going to do and how you're going to get care. So that's the other things to consider. So Soledad, as it we're all kind of users of this public domain infrastructure, right? And being where you are in Berkeley, in Berkeley there, and then with labs, what do you see as the main risks and threats that exist to us as a world community with respect to this public domain infrastructure?
Well, the threats are multiple, and I think they are, global right now, and it depends also on things like the period of history we are going through, right? As Amanda says, the threats are different if there's an election going on, for example, or there's a pandemic going on, because the purpose of the attacks, they change. So the threats, are different because of that. And then the risks is something that has to have two components: a threat and a vulnerability, right? So all the risks that you can encounter, they have to be with vulnerabilities that are, in infrastructure, in services, in software, et cetera, et cetera. From a point of view of the end user, the things that a person can do is try to avoid some things, right? For example, how much information they expose on social networks, or be aware of that type of information, be a little bit more conscious. It's like protecting ourselves physically, or protecting our house or our car. We lock it down, right? And we take some measures. So it's the same with the digital world. Just like to be a little bit aware of where you click and what you are exposed globally. And also, yeah, second guess and give it a little bit of more thoughts to things like, for example, weird emails, right? Because there are a lot of like these phishing campaigns that normally they end up in the biggest compromises or attacks in the end, and they start with just innocent emails that they someone, if is not paying attention, it doesn't look at the maliciousness on them.
Yeah. Yeah, Amanda, what are your thoughts on that?
I think Soledad hit it, pretty well. The threats, like she said, I like how she said they're global and multiple, right? And they're evolving, and there's more than one that come at you at the same time, as an individual, as a family, as an organization. And I think, cybersecurity awareness just makes it that much more important. Like, how are we educating ourselves and our community? Often in English and in Spanish, right? Particularly for Latinos, a lot of the information out there is in English. We don't have Spanish language resources for folks to learn the basics about cyber and privacy. And so I think, that's going to shift. And I think that's good. That's exciting to see, because we have to keep up with the threats and make sure we're informing ourselves and our community.
Yeah, I think that those are all great points, and appreciate that perspective. And it's enlightening because it's things that I haven't thought about. So I really appreciate that view. One of the things I like to explain to people too about the threats. Everybody used to think it's always this guy in this hoodie, right? And he's hacking away at a keyboard, and he's really coming at you. Well, the ransomware. Let's just call them the gangs, the organized crime that is around cyber these days. It's not a hacker. It's not a guy sitting at a keyboard, with his hoodie on, doing crazy things. It's a whole business enterprise, right? So I mean, these organizations that are coming after businesses, coming after individuals, and asking for money, right, to holding your information hostage, are full-blown businesses. They have CEOs, they have COOs, they have chief operating officers, they have help desks to help the victims through the process. They're very caring, and they'll speak to you in whatever language they need to come to you in. They have a very sophisticated operation. So where people used to think, well, it'll be obvious when I'm getting compromised, or when I'm getting something that we call social engineering, right? It'll be obvious when that's happening to me. None anymore. They're very much more sophisticated at this point. Some of these threats and attackers. So and it's happening to individuals, and it's happening to businesses, right? So I think it's something that people need to be aware of, and that the whole world community needs to come up in awareness on this, because if an individual is attacked, then they go to work and maybe they bring their laptop from home or they bring their phone from home into their workplace. And then that becomes connected to their work environment, and that attack spreads through that environment. So, we all need to be aware of this, not only from the individual side, but from the business side, right? So, moving on to the kind of the next topic, I wanted to spend a minute and just focus on that business community a little bit. So I've been around, and everybody that works for me says I'm old. So I've been in this community for 37 years, working cybersecurity issues, from government to industry and that sort of thing. And sometimes the conversations that I'm having is not only just to convince organizations and businesses that their cybersecurity is a business risk and that they need to address it now, but I'm often met with sort of this response of, well, it's not being required. So why do I need to spend money on it now? Why don't I just wait? And it's that type of response that I often get. So my question to you is, as industry experts, practitioners, decision makers in our own respective industries, how can we better prepare our businesses instead of just checking boxes when we have a requirement and doing the bare minimum? How do we prepare our businesses for this rising threat? So, Amanda, can you share your perspectives on that?
Sure. So I think it's easy, honestly, to start. I think it's just ongoing that's difficult to sustain. But I think you start with, saying cybersecurity is everyone's job, period. Um, and then you practice that, right? You model that. So what does that mean? So when we say cybersecurity is everyone's job, that means the executive assistant, that means facilities staff who's coming in and out of a building physically matters. It means that how people feel at work matters, especially now when you have this overlapping layer of mental health issues and the stress of the pandemic and financial issues. And these are all potential threats, right, to a system that folks don't necessarily think of when they think of cybersecurity. But that's where, if a disgruntled employee has access to data that you don't know they have access to, they can potentially take those files and use them or give them somewhere else. And that's for any organization, a nonprofit, a member of Congress, a for-profit organization, somebody who employs 5 people, somebody who employs 10,000 people, somebody who's based in the US, somebody who's a multinational organization. It's everywhere, right? So if you just start with that as cybersecurity is everyone's job, you can start to have a conversation specific to your organization and your mission and your work. Well, if cybersecurity is everyone's job, what does that mean for us? And then you can talk about the investment, and then you can have the conversation with your board. You can have a conversation with your clients. But you have to start with cybersecurity is everyone's job. And then model that behavior. So to your point too about, you have C-suite folks, you might have a lot of resources. I'm sure Soledad has stories too. We hear stories all the time of how bad actors have entered systems through mistakes. And people don't report those mistakes because they're scared of the consequences. So when we say that cybersecurity is everyone's job, we also have to attach this culture of speaking up. Is it okay in your workplace to say, hey, I clicked this link, I got this text, I accidentally downloaded XYZ. Does that person, 1, know where to go? And 2, will they even say something? Or is that threat going to stay in your system because you don't have a culture of trust and communication? So all those things are tied in. It's not just the technology, it's the culture, it's the people, it's the processes, all those things that you have to take time to work through as a team, not just C-suite and push down, but actually have a conversation amongst your team.
That's great. I love that perspective, and that emphasis on culture and the culture of your organization is I believe one of the most critical aspects of it. Beyond any technology you might be implementing, it doesn't really matter if you implement the best technology in the world. If you don't have a culture of security, your data is still going to go out the door.
And notice I didn't say a specific sector, and I didn't say a specific industry either, right? This is for anybody. So
that's right. Absolutely. Soledad, any thoughts on that?
Oh, I completely subscribe to that. So since, the beginning of my career, that was a very important part of my job, actually, to spread the cybersecurity culture across the whole organization and beyond, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very important. It used to be way much difficult before. I have to say, things are changing, right? And people in general in our organization have this more internalized. And as we have been speaking about cybersecurity in companies and organizations for a long time, and now, from scratch developers, system administrators, till executive levels, they can talk, and they talk about cybersecurity way more than before. So I think we are in the right track in there. And I think one of the most important things about cybersecurity in businesses is communications. Um, you have to have people that can communicate well about and are able to align, for example, business goals with cybersecurity, right? Because
Hmm.
in the end, businesses are businesses and they have to thrive. So cybersecurity has to be something that helps the business, not something that blocks any business. It can be a business or it can be a scientific organization, right? Cybersecurity needs to operate on a transparent way, and for that, it it is needed a lot of communication and culture about cybersecurity and get everybody on board to think everybody's responsible for the cybersecurity. And also, there's a myth sometimes about cybersecurity that is kind of like a very complex, which it is, but unachievable uh, subject for some
Hmm.
folks. And I always advocate to take the myth out and explain it with words that people can understand and get everybody on board, and not have fear of cybersecurity, but try that people understand concepts and they can incorporate them in on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's excellent. I've been, kind of preaching that same thing for years, right? Is that you don't have to you don't have to solve that really, really hard problem. There's that 10% of really, really hard problems, and the other 90% are the things that are easy. It's the stuff that's already there. It's just making people aware. It's using the mechanisms you already have in place. You don't have to buy anything to get solved 90% of the problem. Updating your systems on a regular basis, just normal routine things. And that kind of brings me to kind of the next thing, because one of my things I try to talk at colleges and things about is that, hey, coming into a cybersecurity workforce, again, it's not the people in a hoodie sitting and hacking at a keyboard. Cybersecurity is a very broad career field. There are so many different entry points, but we still have that real big challenge, right? And that's the workforce. So, we hear all the time that cybersecurity jobs are going unfilled. There's, millions, or, certainly, millions of jobs across the world that have the cybersecurity sort of skill set in their mix, right? And so those people just aren't coming into that workforce. How do we encourage people to enter the career field? And Soledad, I know you've been doing some fantastic work in your organization to bring women into that workforce. So can you talk a little bit about that? How do we encourage young people, old people, career changers, people of all walks of life? How do we get them into this career field?
Yeah, I think that's a keyword: young people, right? We need definitely we need more people in cybersecurity. There's been always a gap of the talent that is needed, and the demands of the job. And right now, I think the breach is very deep. So we need to incorporate people that is seeking to get a career in technology, And we need to educate the next generation on cybersecurity, because that's the people that is going to solve this type of problems, right? We only can pass our experience, but we are not that many. We need way more people to get education on cybersecurity. And there's many gaps. One of them is that there's not enough people in general. Another gap is minorities, right? So there's no many Latinos in cybersecurity, and there's barely women in cybersecurity. So we are here, I think, representing a double minority today, Amanda and I. And
Yeah.
yeah, I created this organization that is called Girls Can Hack in 2014, when I realized that I was the first woman ever in the cybersecurity department at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and there were no women around in any other organizations, and I thought that we needed to do something. So we're working towards encouraging women to look into the cybersecurity field especially from a very young age. And I have to say that it doesn't take that much, though, for young people to get super excited about cybersecurity and the field, because it really is a very interesting, complex, dynamic world, and it's easy to get people engaged with it.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And so, and Amanda, so we, Soledad touched on the issue. We have this great forum. So how do we get more Latinos working in cybersecurity?
I think you go find them. I work a lot with students and teachers and folks in K 12, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? We need more volunteers. We need more mentors. We need folks to just stand up and be present, right? And I think so there's multiple things, right? One is the technical mentors and the volunteers. Sometimes there are a bunch of us, Latinos, minorities, women, in entry level, mid career level positions who are hustling, but they don't feel like they're ready to be a mentor yet. They're not experienced enough, they're not ready, but they are, right? So we need those people to step in.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to be technical. You don't have to be on the keyboard, right? I always say I'm one of those people who can't hack your computer, but I know the people who can, right? So it's my job
That's my line.
to be, but it's my job to be a bridge, right? To find people like Soledad for the students who are, mini Soledads or Soledad juniors, who I can say, okay, you know what? Here's a person in the field doing this work. Look at her career path, reach out to them and ask questions. So that's one. The other way, I think, to get students involved from all types of backgrounds, including folks who are on the spectrum, folks who are neurodiverse, folks with disabilities, just different perspectives, is to go to them, right? So if you ask a high school student, why are you not involved in cyber? What have you heard about cyber? You'll be really surprised by the honesty. Especially for girls. Some of them may have started in robotics or cyber in middle school. They get to high school and it's mostly boys, and the boys don't want to play, right? They don't want to be team players. So we have to push back against that. And it's not just our job, right? But it's also the job of the boys to learn your team is going to be diverse. How do you operate in this environment? Your success depends on how you interact with your peers. I think we have to do a better job as volunteers and mentors of talking about those topics and helping to fill the gaps that teachers don't have time to do. So I think that's one way. At the college level, working with HBCUs, working with Hispanic serving institutions, that's where the talent is, and they're not being hired in the numbers that they should be. So I think it's a lot of outreach in that space. And then I'll leave you with one final example. So 4 years ago in 2018, I was asked to volunteer with the NICE Cybersecurity K-12 Education Conference. And I launched this event called the National Cyber Signing Day. And this is its 4th year. And so what we're doing is we're elevating students to the level of student athletes. So if you think of a signing day for football or basketball, soccer, it's a big thing. But we don't have an equivalent for cybersecurity. So we started one. And those interviews, I would really encourage people to find it, that link for National Cyber Signing Day, and watch the video from last year. We have one coming up in December as well. And the students and how they got into cyber, what they're doing now. They have paid internships in high school. They're learning how to reverse engineer malware in high school, and they're paid and they have clearances, which is fantastic. We need to do more of that work, and that requires
Yeah, that's
investment.
amazing.
Yeah, that is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I had no idea that you were involved in it. I've heard of that, and I thought it was the greatest
Mm-hmm.
idea. So thank you for
Yeah.
doing that. That's fantastic. And I think just to build on that, I think if the young folks that are getting into the career field start
Mm-hmm.
mentoring other, even if it's going down to the K through 12s, and mentoring people there. I mean, trust me, if once you have a job, you can mentor somebody that's about to graduate from college, and they will really appreciate it. And the energy that you get from providing that kind of mentorship is just incredible. It just builds on itself. So don't be afraid to go and do it, and just try it, because it really does give you a lot of energy, and it's a lot of fun, because the kids are just consuming this
Yeah.
information, and also others, career changers, people coming out of the military. A lot of people have a lot of great background, and it's not a hard step to transition into some role in the cybersecurity spectrum. And so, just helping those folks out, it'll do a world of good, and it'll really help a lot of people. We're got about 4 more minutes until we're going to switch over to questions and answers. I probably have about 50 more minutes worth of discussion with you two, because this is such great stuff. But let me just ask one last question before we go to question and answers, and that is, as the viewers are wanting to learn more and more about cybersecurity, how do we empower those in the Latino community to be active in the industry, and for those in the industry to become advocates in leadership positions? So I know we talked a little bit about this, but Amanda, what are your thoughts on how do we really do that reach out?
So I think it's all about building relationships, right? And you know, when we're defining cybersecurity, I lean towards relationships, right? And I forget sometimes about the technology because it's changing so much. But I really think it's relationship building. We have to, even ourselves, students of all ages, right? We're forever learners. You have to learn how to build a relationship. And in cybersecurity, it's critical because if something happens, I have to be able to pick up the phone and call Soledad and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. We need to take action. And Soledad has to trust me that I know what I'm saying and that she needs to take action or elevate to our boss or whoever it might be. That's a relationship, right? And you can build a relationship during a crisis, but it's not the best time. And so I think my advice on how to reach out to folks, how to get our community involved is we don't, and I'll say this too, within cybersecurity, we have to know our federal partners, our law enforcement partners within the context of cyber. So FBI has a cyber mission, Secret Service has a cyber mission, Homeland Security has a cyber mission. Those organizations also have to reach out to us and build trust and build a relationship too. For nonprofits, for industry, for government, state and local government especially, the threats are everywhere. So I think you have to build relationships with law enforcement in the context of cyber for careers and for security. You have to know as a business who your colleagues are in your industry to share threats across that. And if you're just a student of any age, just Google, right? Search for things, read things. Department of Defense press releases are public, the White House on cyber. I really encourage people to read what's out there and ask questions and reach out to people because most folks in cyber are willing to sit down with you and share information on the technical side, the practitioner side, operational. You just have to ask.
Yep, I definitely agree. Soledad, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that to do about empowering the Latino community, we're doing it right now, right? Like have more, of these tech summits and have folks, that we are actually doing the work right now and have visibility and talk about cybersecurity, and that attracts, more people to the field for sure. So having a lot of outreach, it's key, I believe, to
Yeah.
engage. But for any minority, in the end, it's the same type of things, right? So you see people that look like you, right, and they are doing something that it looks super interested, and you think you can
Mhm.
do it too. So I think
Right.
that's a key point.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to go. We're going to open up the lines here, I guess, to Q&A. And again, you can put your questions in the chat function. I think we have a bunch coming in here, and I'm going to have to pull my phone and put on my glasses to actually read it. So hold on, and to those of you back there in the studio, forgive me. I just to change the lighting. It's more of a comment than a question, I think. But rival states have learned attacking U.S. infrastructure via hackers is significantly cheaper than pouring money into their war departments. Um, so what are your thoughts on how all of this affects that critical infrastructure, and what do you see as the main threats to our critical infrastructure? Oh, that's kind of a
Well, I
hard
can,
question.
yeah, I mean, you can approach that questions from many sides. I just briefly want to do like some definition. This is something that maybe actually it has existed uh, for a long time, but nowadays you can do it remotely, right? So you don't have to get physically anywhere to do any kind of, for example, espionage, right? You can do it
Right.
remotely from another country, since the interconnection right now is uh, really really high. So there's so many internet of things devices, for example. Everybody's connected, everybody's online. So
Hmm.
organizations, individuals, and industry. So there's no need anymore to do it to put a lot of infrastructure in getting an attack, right? You can do it
Yeah.
from remote, which I think it pinpoints to the thing, it can be cheaper. You can look at that in that way. But yeah, it's different for sure. It can
Is
be,
yeah, definitely.
yeah, I think it's easier also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's evolved. It's and I kind of look back on it. My again almost 4 decades at this point of working in this field. The those threats and things to the critical infrastructure have existed from way back there in the mainframe days when I started my career. Right, they've existed, and it's just hard to come over because those those organizations have to be sort of face that critical infrastructure, but at the same time, they want to modernize and move out so that they're better providing better consumer experiences. And at the same, so when they're not being careful necessarily about their cybersecurity practices internally, it sometimes causes them problems. And so these are not insurmountable problems in most cases, but it gets down to the culture that we talked about earlier, in my opinion. So
If
let
I
me
could
move on
just
to
jump
another.
in real quick.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll
Yeah,
say
please.
real quick on relationships. This is another example of relationships matter. So here in San Antonio, we have funded an Alamo Regional Security Operations Center. And so
Mm,
we have, our utility, electric gas utility there. We have our water utility. We have the city. We have the county. We have increasingly other partners where we're going to be able to have folks in there physically watching threats together, right? So if you think of if you're familiar with certs or if you're familiar with the NKIC as part of DHS, this is a regional approach. And so I think we're going to see that increase more. Again, you have to know who's in the area, and there's no competition necessarily in cyber amongst critical infrastructure entities, right? If you see a threat, you should be able to share across your industry, across the country, across the state. And I think that's where this all is going. Like the threats are going to multiply and evolve and be more complicated, but our relationships have to be stronger than that, and our communication has to be stronger than that. So that's all I wanted to
Agreed.
say for that.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, and definitely, we're definitely seeing some of that increase in certainly with the colonial pipeline, the oil and gas industry, and the others are really increasing that communication amongst themselves, and we've already seen some of that at play. So here's a great question, I think. So with colleges and universities offering more online learning platforms, how can these institutions provide security for themselves and their students? Who wants to take that one?
Well, again, the question is very broad. It goes from, I believe, educate people that is using the online tools to have, since everybody's going in this remote mode, in colleges or hybrid in universities, to, advocate to the IT departments to put a little bit more of attention on security, which I believe they can do, and have that in mind from the beginning to protect not only their assets but also their students, right? So again, I think it comes to having a cybersecurity culture and make sure everybody is aware that they can, put, their 50 cents on the issue, right? From students to
Hmm.
teachers to
Hmm.
people that work to staff.
Right.
So
Right.
I definitely, I think the problem is sometimes, you're halfway, or but sometimes there's no infrastructure at all about security in these organizations. So you have to
Hmm.
tackle the problem differently.
So I think the question was about, was it universities and how to integrate cyber or how to protect students?
Yeah. How do they go about protecting their students?
Mm.
Okay, gotcha. I think Soledad hit it. If there's another question, I'm happy to go to the next one.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next one. So this one is fun. So what are the three things we all should do to practice proper cyber hygiene, and any differences for children? I think that's a good question. So what are your thoughts on the three things that we should all do?
I wouldn't give them a phone till they are now. I think communication, talk to children about the digital world, um, like normally. So they are, from a young age, they are exposed to it, right? It's,
Yeah.
the youth is different these days
Yeah.
in
I
terms
know
of they are
I know I
exposed.
scare I know put the fear in my children when we first gave them their phones at the ages they're not till they're 13, but even then. So, and so one of Amanda's comments earlier, I told them I can't hack into your phone, but I have people that can. So just be careful what you do on your phone.
Exactly,
Just
make
help them
them
understand that,
aware of it.
that whatever you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Soledad.
Yeah, make them aware of it, and
Yeah.
explain that, information that they can expose in the social networks, it can hurt some people sometimes, right?
Yeah.
In many ways, like give them education about cyberbullying. I think it's super important too. um, Also, very basic is, uh, do different passwords for different services, and you can, on with a few tips, I think for children, they go a long way. And also remember that children, they are sponges and they absorb all the information super quickly, and they tend to follow directions. So it's quite, I would say, it's very rewarding when you teach children about cyber because they get it like super quickly, in my experience.
I'll just say quickly, so I have two nieces who are in elementary school, and they are my focus group for all things cyber awareness. And so I like asking questions, and I encourage them to ask me questions, right? So I ask them questions about what they're learning in school, what they're reading, and I want them to ask me questions, like Soledad said, about, what does it mean to be a bully online? What do I do if someone's mean to me online? We have those conversations. And I'll tell you, like, to Soledad's point too, one of the books the girls was reading was about a character who had fun posting videos online and sharing videos with her friends. And there was nothing in there about cyber or privacy or bullying. It was just, hey, look at us having fun and people are liking our video, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think what we're missing is a piece about, well, cyber awareness and privacy, and in the same way that we teach our kids about personal space, what does personal space mean online? How do you know when someone crosses that line? And so I think what's really exciting about this coming year is, because of my nieces and because of this gap, we decided to write a children's book series on cybersecurity awareness aimed at early readers. And
Nice.
so we're really excited to work on that. And there's not any much out there, right? That's fun, that's engaging, that makes sense to students who are young in elementary school or who are just learning how to read. And like Soledad said, it's super rewarding because you see their wheels turning, you see their eyes light up. So I think if there are any tips out there, I would say, again, ask questions, encourage kids to ask you questions of all ages. And then I would also say, on the other side of that, talk to older folks too. My grandmother and I lived together during the pandemic, and I started checking her mail. She started coming to me with her cell phone with text messages about Social Security threats, people that
Yeah.
were trying to get her information. So I think we focus a lot on young folks, but the older folks, they are getting these equally very simple but multi-layered threats every day through the mail that lead them to a website that they go to on their phone and that they might enter information. So they're longer, they're not as quick as the threats we're seeing with younger folks or online necessarily directly, but older folks are very vulnerable to these threats as well and can lose money, they can lose their savings, they can lose pensions. So I think we have to talk as a community within our multi-generational households, within our families, about the threats that each of us can see and how to navigate those.
That's
Okay.
excellent. I know one of the things I always emphasize to my children and my grandchildren is that anything you put on a social media platform online, you may have an expectation of privacy, and that platform may provide you some expectation of privacy. In reality, once you put it out there, it's out there. So be careful about what you decide to put out there. Don't just if you're out partying with your friends, teenagers, don't put it on social media because the whole world has it now, and it will come back to haunt you at some point in time. So just be careful about what you decide to put out. So here, actually we're about out of time for this, so we need to kind of switch over to wrap up. But we got a lot of other great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to, but hopefully we covered enough touched on enough of those points. And one was on how do I get involved if I'm from a social sciences perspective. And what I was going to just one last comment on that is that that's a huge area for cybersecurity, social engineering, social how people interact, the culture. It's all very critical to the cybersecurity. So it is a very important piece and component of the cybersecurity infrastructure or ecosystem, if you will. All right, in terms of wrapping up, so we provided a lot of a thumbnail sketch of a lot of really kind of daunting challenges, which I think hopefully will lead people to want to find out more. and we want to encourage that and help people to go out and spread the word and get out there and do their own research. But can you give us some thoughts, Soledad? We'll start with you, some wrap up thoughts on the topic and how people can get involved.
Yeah, I think I would say that cybersecurity is nothing to be afraid of, but the contrary. It's a great field, very interesting, and it's something. It's actually the field that gives support to the world right now in terms that it gives support to technology, right? It controls confidentiality that we were talking about. It controls, availability of the information and services, and it controls the building of the technology and the services that that technology is giving. It's also all over the social networks and anything that really is online. So cybersecurity is there in the background, and I will encourage people to look into the field, especially because we need more people that get expertise in cybersecurity to cover uh, the job demands that are really, really high. And I encourage always not only to get an education so people can go safely in the digital world, but join us in the workforce because we need you.
Yes, agreed. Amanda, final thoughts?
Yeah. So thank y'all. I think this was a great discussion. And I think, the whole title of the panel today, right, was Safeguarding America's Cybersecurity. And I hope that folks take away that it's a people focused business, not technology focused business. It's relationships, and there's also room for everybody. I came to cyber, like I said, through digital marketing, through analytics, through privacy. We need folks with all different backgrounds, with all different experiences, of all different ages to be engaged in cyber. And there's a place for you, right? So I really want to encourage people to see themselves in cyber. And I'm sure for both of us to reach out to us with any questions. There are difficult things, there are complicated things, there are barriers maybe that seem to persist for folks in our community. But those, I think, are our strengths and what make us very, very unique and in high demand in this field is because of our experiences. So we can leverage that in this space and help to protect. So I think if you feel like you have a calling for public service, if you get bored easily, if you like asking questions, finding patterns, trends, things that are off, even just bringing people together in a different way, cybersecurity is a really good place for you. And we need you either in the government or for profit, in the military, running a business, in all these places. So I'm really looking forward to seeing folks reach out to us and seeing more of us in the field.
Great. Well, thank you both. I want to thank you, Soledad and Amanda, for joining us. You're just absolutely amazing. You are role models for the community and for certainly for women in cyber. And I hopefully people will see this and really want to come to the field based on what they heard from you too. So thanks again, and thanks to the CHCI Tech Summit for having us. Please keep tweeting about this summit, CHCI, hashtag CHCI Summit. There's several sessions throughout the day coming up, and stay tuned now for our digital schools, education, workforce development, and technology at 1:45. And enjoy the rest of the summit. Have a wonderful Thursday. Take care.